Every idea has an original story. This shoe is just one and the same. We're gonna sit down with Tinker Hatfield about the Air Max 1. I'm Robbie Williams, Global Brand Manager of Sneaker Culture and Footwear Curation for the Nike Department of Archives. And this is Tinker Hatfield. How are you?
I'm good.
Take me back to a young Tinker in 1986.
Well, I mean, I remember it pretty clearly because I was new to the sneaker business. Nike was actually having a bit of trouble. The approach to design, which was performance driven and utilitarian in nature, was kind of had maybe hit up against a ceiling a little bit. We were out looking to try and find some inspiration. So I was in Paris, being an architect. I was just naturally drawn toward looking at architecture. And then I came back and drew this shoe up. You know, you need to be inspired and you need to check all those criteria boxes that will help a product work. And then the style has to sort of be blended in while you're doing that. And then what happens? That original inspiration, in this case, building turned inside out. You could just sort of take, and you don't turn everything inside out, but you take a little bit. We spent a lot of time trying to convince people that this shoe was not only going to work, but it was going to possibly just change the way people looked at sneakers.
It does reach a bump in the road and some failure. What was the first signs of that failure?
The material wasn't holding up. We found out that, you know, there were some issues with the size of the bag. And, you know, when you're trying to be the first, you just learn along the way.
So you take that moment, you're like, man, well, I did it, now I gotta go back to the drawing board? Like, how do you reprise to get back and refocus?
I think that you just have to have an attitude of perfection. You want perfection. You know you're not going to get there, but you want to get there.
And I guess having that moment to redesign was a great moment to kind of take that process.
Well, you know, the lab, you know, that represents this scientific side of things. You have to pay attention to what they're telling you because they know, you know, a lot more about the nature of failure and the consequences too.
Being that Nike is a young company at that time, you still have the opportunity to pivot a lot faster where you can try things and get the feedback and response in a lot faster manner. I think the only way to really do this is to see it in motion.
Let's check it out. Let's have some fun with the board.
So, Tinker, tell me, what are we looking at?
You know, basically, these are all various iterations of the original design, but mostly what we're talking about here is also this sort of the process of improving or changing, you know, as per the wear testing. So.
And you can actually see in some of these viewpoints of like the air unit being larger, the air unit being smaller. So kind of like the before and after kind of design.
This is a very, very early sketch. It shows a bigger window and then just a little bit of the midsole kind of coming up and wrapping the upper a little bit so it's stable. Mark and I traveled all over Asia looking for meshes and different materials, something that would sort of fit the bill with more breathability, and then we had, of course, the synthetic suede for durability around that edge and things like that. So we were all over the place.
Well, I think, you know, this is a perfect time to actually look at materials. Luckily, we have, you know, the versions of the shoe, so we can see the evolution.
Yeah, let's look at it.
Into it. So here we have a 2013 Air Max OG. From outside looking in at the time, like when I saw this shoe, I was like, all right, this is the best iteration or interpretation of 1986 in a shoe in 2013.
Yeah. And I think it was, you know, basically people writing into us or calling in and telling us, you know, the stuff's not as good as the original stuff. So I think there was a better effort here at this time.
Let's pull the zero over here and just give me some comparison differences.
This design was the first one on the paper. The problem with this was that it was literally from top to bottom too futuristic. Sometimes it's good though as a designer to go further out, and then you can always reel it back or scale it back, and that's exactly what happened here.
I think it's time that we look and see where we're at now and see what we've done. You know, when I look at this in its truest form and in the original colorway, I think of how many times I've seen it in different forms and people interpret it different. It's something about this particular one that still holds true. I think it's a true testament to design and creativity and failing forward.
Yeah. The reality is that we oftentimes make mistakes, or we're in kind of a learning process, and you have to then, be self-critical and go, okay, we gotta make this change. The fact that it's actually gotten better and is more like what kind of the original idea was is fabulous.
Tinker, this has been incredible.
Yeah.
This has been an honor, a moment. Thank you so much for what you've contributed to culture, not only in footwear and design, but just in sneakers altogether.
Thank you. It's been great.
With the Air Max 90 being a fly ease shoe, first with the collapsible heel, we were taking something that is integrating future with the past with the future, but also we were two brothers working together.
This was not only an opportunity to work with Toby and to think about how iconic designs could be updated, but updated with a purpose.
With the Air Max 90 being the 30th anniversary of the shoe that Tinker did, we both came immediately to the conclusion that this doesn't work unless this actually makes the shoe even better than it was before. As an innovator, I certainly work first on the functionality, and it's not just about can you tie your shoe or not. I was more interested about how they get into the shoe.
As a designer, this was not that easy to take an iconic design and put something drastically different on the shoe. How do we take advantage of all the latest materials and make it look like it's something that no one's seen before? Accessibility is an important factor as well. And so how do you make it possible for more and more people to use?
When we started to have other people working on this, a group here of engineers called the Nerdery, they call themselves the Nerdery, by the way, they came up with this collapsible heel, and when you look at it, you get it right away. Now we truly have something that's hands-free. In a universal way, everybody can have access to it.
In some ways, I look at this and it looks to me like it was always designed this way.
As you clear the heel, then the plastic has the memory and it pops back up. So as you see, it's back up. The reverse is just as easy. Press down on that lip on the back and you slide back out, and you can go into your house and not get yelled at, for wearing your shoes in the house.
Mine went right in.
Me too. And mine's even tied.
I don't think you even need to tie it. This was immediately successful. At least that's what I recall, and that people gravitated to it. This one was really designed for that person who really was looking for a better ride, a more protected, cushioned ride. Most running shoes were either white or dark blue or white and black or gray. There was a lot of gray. Bright colors hadn't quite hit the sort of general running shoe market. When I first drew this one up, I just grabbed the brightest color in my felt pen box, drew it up. I knew I had done the right thing when a shoe reviewer had gotten a hold of this particular model in Great Britain and lambasted it for its bright and garish use of the color red, and that no one would ever wear such an abomination. And I love to hear that kind of stuff because you're on the right track when people start to criticize. That became a signature color for this shoe, and actually had to battle a few people internally because it was unusual even. I think this shoe flipped a switch in a lot of customers' minds that a shoe can not only be technically innovative, but it also can be kind of an object of design and desire.
We used to say there is no finish line. If you sort of apply that back to innovation and performance, athletes are getting bigger, stronger, and faster. We need to sort of keep up with how people are improving in performance. I was an athlete way before I was an architecture student, but going through architecture school, I really learned a solid design process. People's needs and wants and desires, cultural phenomena, and influences from a lot of different things, and that's the way I think most architects kind of look at design. We're trying to do things first, trying to do them better. So my role as a futurist is simply to continue to do what I've done in the past, but actually to just pass along that kind of thinking to others. The real first design was the Air Max Zero. I was trying to take Nike footwear design, in this case running shoe design, into a new place. There were these great airbags laying around that were getting bigger and better, and I visited Renzo Piano's building in Paris, the Pompidou Center, and then I just sort of, I think this is going to be a better, more cushioned running shoe. We're also going to be able to tell a story about the technology because now you can see it. And the funny thing about the Zero, though, was that it was probably a little too progressive impressive. So I had to sort of reel myself back in a little bit to do the one, which achieved everything that we wanted it to achieve, but was a little more palatable than just being a complete spaceship where everything was different than what had preceded it. I remember that Nike shoes, running shoes in particular, were kind of being driven by the market too much. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're a leadership company, that might not be the best place to be, to always be focusing. And so, I just started drawing as if I wasn't paying attention to any of that. It was really much more about how could we improve the performance of a running shoe? How could we also then take design in this sort of more utilitarian world of athletics and add some panache to it, add some inspiration, and continue to maintain a high level of performance. I hadn't been designing shoes for a whole long time. It was pretty easy for me to not even worry about the normal way to design shoes. I think that's a trick for design, whether you're designing cars or bicycles or toasters. There has to be something recognizable about the design for people to understand it. Hopefully there's something new and different about it as well. Air Max Zero, for its time and place, it had too many new ideas. Although all these years later, it's a perfect time to actually bring it out.
My name is Tinker Hatfield. I'm a designer here at Nike. Been designing architecture, apparel, and footwear for almost 25 years. I first got involved with Nike because I was a track athlete at the University of Oregon, and the head track coach was one of the founders of Nike, and that was in 1971. I became one of Bill Bowerman's test pilots. He was the track coach who started the company with Phil Knight. And then I went to architecture school and ultimately became Nike's corporate architect in 1981. But I always figured I would end up designing shoes at some point because that's where the action is. I started designing shoes actually in 1985. One of the very first shoes I worked on was the Air Max. Really, it was a shoe designed during a time when lots of running shoes from the competition as well as within our own company all pretty much looked alike and maybe even performed similarly. It was my job to actually sit down with a few other people and figure out how we're going to break out of that box. We were working on what we called a highly cushioned running shoe, and Nike had the technology in hand, which was to create more cushioning through larger and larger airbag design. Well, as I started to understand more about the technology myself as a designer, it really dawned on me that there was an opportunity to actually eliminate part of the midsole so you could actually see that very technology and make it visible, and hence everybody started calling it visible air. Because prior to this shoe, air was just a word. People didn't understand it. And so actually I remember sketching up the original drawing. I just drew this lozenge-shaped opening. I guess the desired effect was we were differentiating ourselves from the rest of the competition